My name is Claire Ashford. I'm 29 years old. 6 months ago, I sat in my apartment in Denver, watching footage from a hidden camera I'd planted in my own parents' living room. On the screen, my brother Marcus was sliding a stack of documents across the kitchen table toward my father.
Sign it, Dad. It's just a formality. You trust me, right?
My father signed. My mother signed. Marcus took the papers and walked out to his car. Then he made a phone call. He didn't know the camera was still recording.
Got it. The house is leveraged now. That's another $385 in play. These old fools will sign anything.
That was my brother, talking about our parents, the same parents who gave him every dollar they'd ever saved, $340,000, their entire retirement, gone. But here's what Marcus didn't know. His little sister, the one he called just a number cruncher, traces financial fraud for a living. And I'd been building a case against him for 4 months. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop a comment below. Now let me take you back to where it all started. I grew up in Littleton, Colorado, a quiet suburb south of Denver where every house had a 2-car garage and a sprinkler system on a timer. Our house sat on Meadowbrook Lane, a 3-bedroom ranch with a flag out front and a shed in the back where my father kept his tools organized by size on a pegboard wall. My father, Gerald Ashford, owned Ashford Auto Parts on South Broadway. He'd opened the shop in 1991 with a $5,000 loan from his father-in-law and turned it into the kind of place where mechanics drove 20 miles out of their way because Gerald always had the right gasket in stock. He was a man who believed in handshakes early mornings and the idea that a man's son was his legacy. That last part mattered more than anything. My mother, Lorraine, was a homemaker. She kept the house immaculate. She kept the garden trimmed. She kept the peace. When my father raised his voice, which was often, Lorraine would press her lips together and find something to wipe down. A counter, a window, a picture frame that was already clean. She never disagreed with Gerald. Not once. Not in front of us. Not behind closed doors as far as I could tell. She had opinions, but she folded them up like napkins and put them away before anyone could see. My brother Marcus was 4 years older than me, and in our house, those 4 years might as well have been 400. Marcus was the firstborn, the son, the name carrier. From the day I was born, the hierarchy was already carved in stone. Marcus played football in high school. He wasn't great. He was third-string linebacker on a team that went 4-8. But Gerald went to every game, every single one. He wore a custom jersey with Ashford on the back and yelled louder than any father in the bleachers. After games win or lose, Gerald would take Marcus to Denny's for a late-night breakfast. Just the two of them, father and son, building the future. I ran cross-country. I placed 7th at state my junior year. I told my father at dinner that night. He nodded, chewed his steak, and said,
"That's nice, Claire. Marcus, tell me about the networking event."
That was the rhythm of our house. Marcus spoke. Gerald listened. I existed somewhere in the background, like furniture that had always been there and no one thought to rearrange. When Marcus turned 18, Gerald sat him down at the kitchen table and handed him a check for $25,000. I know the exact amount because I was sitting on the staircase doing homework and I heard every word.
"This is your seed money, son. Every great man starts with a first investment. Go build something."
Marcus took that money and tried to flip a house in Aurora. He bought a foreclosure for $19,000, spent $6,000 on materials, then realized he had no idea how to renovate anything. The house sat untouched for 5 months. He eventually sold it at a loss of $11,000, the entire $25,000 gone. Gerald's response. He clapped Marcus on the shoulder at Thanksgiving dinner and said,
"That's tuition in the school of life, son. The next one will be different."
The next one was not different, but that came later. When I turned 18, I asked for $5,000, not for a business, not for an investment, for a laptop. I'd been accepted into the accounting program at University of Colorado Boulder, and the coursework required software that my 7-year-old desktop couldn't run. Gerald didn't look up from the TV.
"You don't need a fancy computer to count numbers, Claire. Use the library."
$5,000, that's what I asked for. 1/5 of what Marcus got to lose on a house he never touched. Lorraine was in the kitchen. I looked at her. She looked at the counter and started wiping. I bought a refurbished laptop from a pawn shop on Colfax Avenue for $312. The battery lasted 40 minutes without a charger. I carried that charger in my backpack for 4 years like it was a lifeline. Because it was. But the money wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the silence. When Marcus failed, Gerald called it a lesson. When I succeeded, Gerald called it nothing. Literally nothing. He said nothing. I graduated summa cum laude, top 3% of my class. I'd been accepted into a forensic accounting certification program, one of only 12 candidates selected that year in Colorado. The ceremony was on a Saturday in May. Folsom Field. 12,000 people in the stands. Lorraine arrived 40 minutes late. She said there was traffic on I-25. She was carrying a Starbucks cup that was still full, which meant she'd stopped on the way. She didn't see me walk across the stage. Gerald didn't come at all. He was at home helping Marcus prepare a pitch deck for investors. Marcus was launching what he called a real estate investment fund. He'd printed business cards on glossy stock. He had a website with stock photos of skyscrapers he didn't own. That same month, Gerald threw a dinner at Sullivan's Steakhouse for 15 people to celebrate Marcus's new company. Filet mignon, a private room. Gerald stood up and gave a toast.
To my son, the future of this family, the one who's going to put the Ashford name on the map.
I know because Lorraine showed me photos afterward. She thought I'd want to see them. I looked at those photos on my phone, sitting alone in my studio apartment near campus. 15 smiling faces around a table. My father beaming, Marcus in a blazer he couldn't afford. A cake that said Ashford Investments in gold frosting. I wasn't in a single photo. I wasn't invited. That night, I made ramen on a hot plate and ate it standing up because I didn't own a dining table. I called home to congratulate Marcus because that's what I did. That's who I was, the good daughter, the quiet one, the one who showed up, called on time, and never caused problems. Marcus answered on the fourth ring. I could hear glasses clinking and laughter in the background. He was still at the dinner.
Oh, hey, Claire, what's up?
I just wanted to say congrats on the company, Marcus.
Thanks. Hey, can I call you back? Dad's about to do another toast.
He never called back. I washed my ramen bowl in the bathroom sink because my kitchen faucet was broken. I sat on my bed, which was a mattress on the floor, and stared at the ceiling. I didn't cry. I'd stopped crying about things like that a long time ago. Crying required hope, and hope required the belief that someone might notice. No one was going to notice. I didn't know it then, but that summer would change everything. Not because of anything my parents did, but because of something Marcus was already building in the dark, something that would swallow our family whole. The summer after my graduation, Marcus's company started looking real, at least on the outside. He rented an office on 17th Street in downtown Denver, glass doors. A receptionist named Kyla who answered the phone with, "Ashford Investments. How may I direct your call?" He had a website redesigned by a firm in Boulder. Professional headshots, testimonials from satisfied clients that I would later discover were entirely fabricated. Gerald was ecstatic. He talked about Marcus the way some fathers talk about war heroes. Every Sunday dinner became a briefing on Marcus's latest deal. A duplex in Lakewood, a condo conversion in Arvada, a commercial lot near DIA that was about to explode in value. I listened. I always listened. And something in the back of my mind, something trained by 4 years of studying financial statements and fraud patterns, began to itch. The numbers Marcus threw around didn't add up. He talked about 18% annual returns like it was casual, like it was normal, like every investment he touched turned to gold. In the real world, consistent 18% returns don't exist, not legally. But I said nothing, because in our family, questioning Marcus was like questioning gravity. You could do it, but no one would take you seriously. Then came the car accident. I was 24. It was a Wednesday night in February. I was driving home from work on I-70 when a pickup truck ran a red light at the Federal Boulevard exit and hit the passenger side of my Honda Civic. The car spun twice. I remember the sound of glass. I remember the airbag. I remember the taste of blood in my mouth from biting my tongue. I woke up in the emergency room at St. Anthony Hospital with a fractured collarbone, 2 cracked ribs, and a concussion. The nurse told me I was lucky. The passenger side was crushed. If anyone had been sitting there, they wouldn't have made it. I called my parents from the hospital bed at 9:17 in the evening. Lorraine answered. "Mom, I was in a car accident. I'm at St. Anthony. I have broken bones. Can you and Dad come?" Silence. Then I heard Gerald's voice in the background.
What happened?
Lorraine relayed my words. I heard Gerald sigh. A long, heavy sigh like I'd just told him the dishwasher was leaking again.
Tell her we'll come tomorrow. Marcus is here. We're going over the quarterly numbers.
Honey, your father says we'll come in the morning. Marcus is presenting his quarterly report tonight, and your father doesn't want to interrupt. Are you okay for now?
I was lying in a hospital bed with a fractured collarbone. My car was totaled. I had no way home. And my father didn't want to interrupt a PowerPoint presentation. "I'm fine, Mom."
Okay, sweetheart, get some rest. We'll see you tomorrow.
They came the next day, at 2 in the afternoon. Gerald stayed for 20 minutes. He spent 11 of those minutes on the phone with Marcus about a closing deadline. Lorraine brought me a card from the drugstore. It said, "Get well soon," with a cartoon bear on the front. She hadn't signed it. Marcus didn't come at all. He sent a text 3 days later.
Heard about the accident. Rough. You good?
2 words. You good? That was the extent of my brother's concern. Meanwhile, I needed a new car. My Honda was totaled, and insurance paid out $4,200, which was barely enough for a down payment on anything reliable. I asked Gerald if I could borrow $2,000 to cover the gap. He leaned back in his recliner and looked at me like I'd asked him for a kidney.
Clear money doesn't grow on trees. You're a working woman now. Figure it out.
I figured it out. I took the bus for 3 months, an hour and 12 minutes each way. I stood in the snow at the Route 15 stop on Colfax at 6:20 in the morning, breath visible, fingers numb, while Marcus drove a leased Mercedes-Benz E-Class that Gerald had co-signed for because
A businessman needs to look the part.
that was the same winter Gerald gave Marcus $80,000. I didn't know the exact number at the time. I found out later when I started digging. $80,000 for a land acquisition in Colorado Springs. There was no land in Colorado Springs. There never had been. But Gerald didn't verify. Gerald didn't ask for paperwork. Gerald trusted his son the way some people trust religion. Absolutely. Blindly, without evidence. That Thanksgiving, I took the bus to Littleton. It was snowing. I arrived 40 minutes late because the Route C had a mechanical issue on Santa Fe Drive. When I walked through the door, everyone was already seated. Marcus was at the head of the table next to Gerald. He was wearing a Rolex Submariner, the real one. Retail price $9,400. I sat at the other end next to Lorraine's empty chair because she was in the kitchen refilling the gravy boat. No one had waited for me. Gerald tapped his glass and made a speech.
I want to thank God for this family, for this food, and especially for my son Marcus, who's out there building an empire and making the Ashford name mean something.
He looked around the table. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone smiling, everyone nodding, everyone looking at Marcus like he was the son. Gerald didn't mention me, not once. After dinner, Marcus pulled up in the driveway to show Uncle Dale his car. I stood by the window watching. Dale whistled. Gerald beamed. Marcus popped the hood like he'd built the engine himself. I was washing dishes. Lorraine was next to me drying. Mom, I got promoted last month. Senior forensic analyst. I'm the youngest person in the firm's history to hold that title.
That's wonderful, honey. Can you hand me that casserole dish?
I handed her the dish. She dried it. She put it away. She never mentioned my promotion again. I drove back to Denver that night on a Greyhound bus because the local routes had stopped running. The bus smelled like diesel and stale popcorn. I sat in the back row next to a window smeared with something I didn't want to identify. I put my earbuds in, leaned my head against the cold glass, and closed my eyes. Somewhere between Littleton and downtown Denver, my phone buzzed. A Facebook notification. Gerald had posted a photo album titled, Ashford Thanksgiving, Blessed and Grateful. 23 photos. Marcus carving the turkey. Marcus with Gerald. Marcus showing off the car. Marcus holding a glass of wine, laughing. I scrolled through every photo. 23 images of my family's holiday. I wasn't in a single one. I put the phone in my pocket and stared out the bus window at the snow falling on the highway. I didn't cry. I was past that. But something in my chest tightened, not pain, not sadness, something quieter, something like acceptance. I was not part of this family. I was adjacent to it, close enough to serve, too far away to matter. The worst part wasn't what they said. It was what happened 3 days later. 3 days after Thanksgiving, Gerald called me, not to check in, not to apologize for the photos. He called because he needed something.
Claire, I need you to do my taxes this year. Marcus says his accountant charges $400 an hour. You can do it for free, right? Your family.
$400 an hour for Marcus's accountant. 0 for me, because I was family. Because family meant free labor when it came to Claire. Sure, Dad, send me the documents. I said yes because that's what I always did. I said yes, and I swallowed the rest. But when Gerald's documents arrived, something caught my eye. A transfer receipt. $47,000 wired to Ashford Investments, LLC on September 14th. I cross-referenced it with the previous year's return. Another transfer. $55,000. The year before that, $62,000. In 3 years, Gerald had funneled $164,000 into Marcus's company, on top of the $80,000 for the Colorado Springs land and the original $25,000 seed money. The total was climbing toward $250,000. And these were only the transactions I could see on Gerald's personal tax filings. I suspected there were more routed through joint accounts, home equity lines. Maybe even Lorraine's modest inheritance from her aunt, who passed in 2019. I wanted to say something. I drafted a text to Gerald 3 times, deleted it 3 times. I knew what would happen. Gerald would call Marcus. Marcus would call me. Marcus would say what he always said.
Don't be jealous, Claire. Just because you sit behind a desk crunching numbers doesn't mean you understand real business.
So I filed the taxes. I noted the irregularities in a private spreadsheet I saved on an encrypted thumb drive. And I said nothing. That was December. By January, something else happened that changed the trajectory of everything. Grandma Rosie called. Rosemary Callahan. My maternal grandmother was 78 years old and sharper than most people half her age. She'd spent 35 years as a clerk at the United States District Court in Denver. She'd processed filings for bankruptcy fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, RICO cases. She'd sat behind bulletproof glass and watched federal judges dismantle criminal enterprises over lunch breaks. She retired at 71, moved into a tidy brownstone on Capitol Hill, and spent her days reading John Grisham novels, doing the New York Times crossword in pen, and keeping an eye on her family from a polite distance. Grandma Rosie didn't meddle, but she noticed everything.
Claire, honey, can you come over for tea this Saturday? I made lemon bars.
I drove to Capitol Hill. The brownstone smelled like Earl Grey and butter. Rosie was sitting at her kitchen table with a manila folder in front of her. Not lemon bars, a folder.
Sit down, sweetheart.
I sat.
I was at your parents' house last Tuesday. Dropped off some canned peaches for your mother. Gerald was at the shop. Marcus was there.
She paused, adjusted her reading glasses.
He didn't know I was still in the hallway. He was on the phone in the kitchen, loud, confident, the way people talk when they think no one's listening.
What did he say?
He said, "The Ashford money's almost tapped. I need another pipeline. Find me 2 more." She looked at me over her glasses. Pipeline. Marks. That's what he said, Claire. 2 more marks. I've heard that language before. For 35 years, I heard it in courtrooms.
My stomach dropped, not because I was surprised, because I wasn't. Rosie opened the folder. Inside were 3 photocopied pages, contracts, investment agreements between Gerald Ashford and Ashford Investments, LLC. Promised returns, 18% annually guaranteed. No risk disclosures, no SEC registration number, no fund prospectus.
I found these on the kitchen table while Lorraine was in the bathroom, Rosie said. I photocopied them on their printer before she came back. Took me 90 seconds. Old court clerk hands, still fast.
I read the documents. My training kicked in like muscle memory. 18% guaranteed returns. That phrase alone was a federal red flag. No legitimate investment fund guarantees returns. It's illegal under SEC regulations. The contracts had no registration, no compliance disclosures, no fiduciary acknowledgement. They were designed to look official to someone who didn't know better. Someone like Gerald. Grandma, this is...
I know what it is, honey. I've seen 100 of these come across the clerk's desk. It's a Ponzi scheme, or something close to it. She folded her hands on the table. Your brother is either running one, or he's about to.
I stared at the pages. My brother's signature at the bottom, my father's signature above it. The date, the amounts, everything laid out like a map to a disaster that was already in motion. What do I do?
Rosie leaned forward. Her eyes were calm. The eyes of a woman who'd spent decades watching justice work slowly but thoroughly. Your grandfather was a man of evidence, Claire. He never accused anyone of anything without proof. Not in 40 years of marriage, not once. She tapped the folder. This is a start, but it's not enough. You need more. You need patterns. You need recordings. You need something a prosecutor can hold in both hands and say, this is what happened.
You're telling me to build a case against my own brother.
I'm telling you to find the truth. What you do with it is your decision. But if I'm right, and I pray I'm not, your parents are going to lose everything, their savings, their house, their retirement. And your brother is going to walk away, clean, because he'll blame the market, blame bad luck, blame everyone but himself. I've seen it happen 100 times.
She reached under the table and pulled out a small cardboard box. Inside was a device no bigger than a thumb drive. Black, matte, a tiny lens on one end.
I ordered this from Amazon, she said, the faintest smile crossing her lips. I watch too many crime shows, but I think you'll know what to do with it.
A hidden camera. My 78-year-old grandmother, retired federal court clerk, crossword enthusiast, lemon bar baker, had just handed me a hidden camera. I held it in my palm. It weighed almost nothing, but it felt like a grenade. Grandma, if I do this and I'm wrong.
Then you'll have footage of your brother eating your mother's meatloaf and talking about real estate. No harm done. She paused. But if you're right, Claire, you'll be the only person in this family who can stop what's coming.
I drove home that night with the camera in my coat pocket and the photocopied contracts in my bag. I sat in my apartment, the same studio with the mattress on the floor, though I'd upgraded to an actual bed frame by then. I opened my laptop and started a new encrypted folder. I named it Ashford. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk and read every SEC enforcement action I could find on Ponzi schemes. Madoff, Stanford, Rothstein. The patterns were always the same. Guaranteed high returns, no transparency, charismatic operators who built trust before they built traps. Marcus was charismatic. Marcus built trust. Marcus had been building a trap for 7 years, and my parents were already inside it.
She handed me a small black device. Don't open this yet, she said. When you need it, you'll know.
I had no idea what she meant, but I would. No, that's not true. I knew exactly what she meant. I'd known for years. I'd just been too afraid to admit it. But I wasn't afraid anymore. The following Saturday, I drove to Littleton. I told Lorraine I wanted to deep clean the living room as a surprise for Gerald's upcoming 63rd birthday. She was delighted.
That's so thoughtful, Claire. You've always been the responsible one.
She said it like a compliment. It wasn't. Responsible was their word for invisible. Marcus was ambitious. Marcus was a visionary. I was responsible, which meant I showed up, did the work, and never asked for credit. Lorraine went to the grocery store at 11:15. I had approximately 90 minutes. I placed the first camera on the top shelf of the bookcase in the living room, tucked between a ceramic eagle Gerald got at a swap meet and a framed photo of Marcus shaking hands with some man at a golf tournament. The camera was small enough to disappear behind the frame. Its lens pointed directly at the kitchen table where Gerald and Marcus always sat during their business meetings. The second camera I placed in Gerald's home office. He called it his office, but it was really a spare bedroom with a filing cabinet and a desk covered in auto parts catalogs. I positioned it on top of the cabinet, angled toward the desk where Gerald signed paperwork. I tested both angles from my phone. Clear picture, clean audio, timestamp in the corner. My hands were steady the entire time. My conscience was not. I stood in the hallway between the two rooms and asked myself a question I'd been avoiding. Was I really doing this, planting surveillance cameras in my parents' home without their knowledge? Recording private conversations? Building a case against my own brother like he was a target in one of my firm's investigations? The answer came faster than I expected. Yes, because no one else would. Gerald wouldn't investigate Marcus. Gerald would sooner sell the house than question his son. Lorraine wouldn't push back. Lorraine had never pushed back on anything in 40 years of marriage. And Marcus knew exactly what he was doing. He'd spent 7 years perfecting the performance, the suits, the confidence, the vocabulary borrowed from CNBC segments and Forbes articles he'd half read. He wasn't a businessman. He was an actor. And my parents were his most devoted audience. I left the house before Lorraine returned. I bought a birthday card for Gerald on the way home. I signed it, Love, Claire. I mailed it from a post office on Broadway because I knew if I brought it in person, it would end up on the counter under a stack of Marcus's business cards. Then I waited. The first 2 weeks of footage were uneventful. Gerald watching the Broncos game, Lorraine watering the plants on the windowsill, Gerald arguing with the supplier on the phone about a shipment of brake rotors. Normal life, ordinary silence. I checked the feeds every night after work. I'd sit at my desk with a cup of coffee, plug in my earbuds, and scrub through hours of footage at double speed. Living room, kitchen table, office, nothing. I began to doubt myself. Maybe Grandma Rosie was wrong. Maybe Marcus was just bad at business, not criminal. Maybe the 18% returns were exaggerated but not fabricated. Maybe I was the paranoid sister looking for evidence of something that didn't exist because it was easier than admitting my family simply didn't value me. Then week 3 happened. Thursday evening, 7:42 according to the timestamp. Marcus arrived at the house in his Mercedes. He walked in without knocking. He never knocked. Gerald was in his recliner. Lorraine was in the kitchen making pot roast. Marcus kissed Lorraine on the cheek, grabbed a beer from the refrigerator, and sat down across from Gerald. They talked for 18 minutes about nothing important. The Broncos' draft picks, a pothole on Meadowbrook Lane, whether the shed roof needed reshingling, normal father-son conversation. I almost stopped watching. Then Marcus's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, stood up, and walked to the back porch. The living room camera lost visual, but the microphone still picked up his voice through the screen door. He didn't close it all the way. He never expected anyone to be listening.
Yeah, I'm at my parents' place. No, they don't know. Listen, the Ashford well is drying up. I've pulled $340 out of them over 7 years. There's maybe another $60 in the house equity, but I need to move carefully. The old man's starting to ask about statements.
A pause. Someone on the other end spoke. I couldn't make out the words. Marcus laughed. A short, sharp laugh I'd never heard before. Not the charming laugh he used at family dinners, something colder.
Relax. I'll get him to sign a refi. Tell him it's a better interest rate. He won't read the fine print, he never does. I need another $60K though, so find me another mark. The Petersons in Fort Collins are almost ready. The wife's been asking about returns. Send her the prospectus, the fake one.
I stopped the playback. I rewound. I listened again. Find me another mark. The fake one. I listened a third time. Word by word, each syllable was clear. There was no ambiguity, no misinterpretation, no innocent explanation. My brother was running a Ponzi scheme. He was using fabricated prospectuses to lure investors. He was calling his targets marks. He was planning to drain the last of my parents' equity by tricking Gerald into signing a refinance he didn't understand. And he was actively recruiting new victims. The Petersons in Fort Collins. A real family, real people, about to be fed into the same machine that had already consumed my parents' entire retirement. I sat in my apartment for a long time after that. The footage was paused on a frame of Marcus walking back through the screen door, beer in hand, smiling at Gerald. The smile of a son, the smile of a predator. I thought about what Grandma Rosie had said.
Your grandfather was a man of evidence. Never accuse without proof.
I had proof now, but was it enough? One phone call recorded through a screen door. A defense attorney would call it hearsay, circumstantial, taken out of context. I needed more. I needed the documents. I needed the money trail. I needed Marcus on camera doing something undeniable. So I kept the cameras running. I kept watching. I kept building. Every night after work, I came home to my apartment, opened my laptop, and added to the encrypted folder. Transaction records from Gerald's tax filings, the photocopied contracts from Grandma Rosie, the audio from the porch call, cleaned up and time-stamped. A spreadsheet tracking every dollar I could trace from Gerald's accounts to Ashford Investments, LLC, and from there into shell entities I was beginning to identify. Ashford Holdings, Ashford Capital Group, Ashford Property Partners, 4 companies. Same registered agent, same P.O. box in Aurora, all of them empty, all of them funnels. I was building a case the same way I built cases at work, methodical, patient, ruthless with data, even when the data hurt. And it hurt. Every night it hurt. Because every transaction I traced, every fake prospectus I identified, every shell company I mapped, was proof that the brother I'd grown up with, the brother I'd called to congratulate the brother I'd spent my whole life trying to impress, had never seen our parents as anything but a source of money. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the footage on my laptop. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from recognition. I'd investigated cases exactly like this for my job. Shell companies, fake returns, desperate marks. But this time, the marks weren't strangers in a case file. They were my parents, and the fraudster was my brother. 3 more weeks passed. The cameras kept recording, the folder kept growing. I documented 11 more phone calls Marcus made from my parents' house. Most were short, fragments.
The returns report goes out Friday. Use the template, not the actuals. Tell the Hendersons their Q3 statement is delayed. Blame the auditor. If anyone asks for a withdrawal, stall them. Say the funds are in a 60-day lock period.
Each call was a brick. I was building a wall. But the footage I needed, the one that would make everything undeniable, came on a Tuesday night in late March. 6 weeks after I'd planted the cameras. Marcus arrived at the house at 7:15. He was carrying a leather briefcase I'd never seen before. Not the cheap one from TJ Maxx he used to carry. This one was cognac-colored, monogrammed. M.A. in gold letters. He'd bought it with someone else's retirement. He sat down with Gerald at the kitchen table. Lorraine brought them coffee. She always brought them coffee. Then she retreated to the living room to watch her shows. She never sat in on their meetings. She said she didn't understand business. The truth was she'd never been invited to understand. The living room camera captured Lorraine on the couch, volume up, on a rerun of some home renovation show. The kitchen table camera captured everything else. Marcus opened the briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. White pages, blue ink headers, official looking. I would later confirm they were fabricated from a template Marcus had downloaded from a legal document website and modified with his own terms.
Dad, I need you to sign something.
Gerald put down his coffee.
What is it?
A refinance on the house. I found you a better rate through one of my banking contacts. You're currently at 4.7%. This drops you to 3.2. You'll save almost $400 a month.
Gerald picked up the first page, squinted. He wasn't wearing his reading glasses. They were on the kitchen counter 6 feet away. He didn't get up to get them.
Looks complicated, Marcus.
It's standard, Dad. Boilerplate stuff. The bank just needs your signature and Mom's. I'll handle the rest.
Gerald hesitated. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something flicker across his face on the camera. Doubt, uncertainty. A question forming behind his eyes that he didn't have the language to ask. Then Marcus leaned forward. He put his hand on Gerald's arm. The gesture was practiced, warm. The gesture of a son who loved his father, the gesture of a con man closing a deal.
Dad, you trust me, right? I've made you 18% every year. Have I ever let you down?
Yes, 100 times, in ways you'll never admit and he'll never see. But Gerald didn't say that. Gerald nodded slowly.
I trust you, son.
He signed. Page 1, page 2, page 3. His hand was steady. He didn't read a single line.
Now we need Mom's signature.
Lorraine, come sign something.
Lorraine walked in, drying her hands on a dish towel.
What is it?
Refinance. Marcus found us a better rate.
Lorraine looked at Marcus, then at the papers, then at Gerald.
Should I read it?
It's fine, Mom. Just a formality. You'll save money.
Lorraine signed. She didn't sit down to do it. She stood at the counter, leaned over, and wrote her name in the quick, dutiful way she'd signed every document Gerald had ever put in front of her. Marcus collected the pages. He slid them into the briefcase. He snapped it shut. The gold clasps clicked. That sound, that crisp, metallic click, was the sound of my parents losing their home. What they had just signed was not a refinance. I would later confirm this with a real estate attorney. It was a home equity line of credit that leveraged the full assessed value of the house, $385,000, and routed the funds to a holding account controlled by Ashford Investments, LLC. My parents had just signed their home away, and they thought they were saving $400 a month. Marcus stood. He hugged Gerald. He kissed Lorraine on the forehead.
I'll take care of everything. You two just relax.
He walked out the front door, got into his Mercedes, sat in the driver's seat. Then he made a phone call. The living room camera was too far away to catch his voice. But the office camera, the one I'd placed on the filing cabinet in the spare bedroom, had a window that faced the driveway. The window was open 2 inches. Lorraine always cracked it for airflow. 2 inches was enough.
Got it. The house is leveraged now. That's another $385 in play.
A pause. Laughter from the other end.
No, they didn't read it. They never read anything. These old fools will sign anything I put in front of them.
I heard every word. I played it back. These old fools. I played it again. Will sign anything. Again. These old fools will sign anything I put in front of them. My father, the man who built a business from a $5,000 loan, who woke up at 5 a.m. for 34 years, who shook every customer's hand and remembered their first name, Gerald Ashford, an old fool. My mother, the woman who kept the house spotless, who made pot roast every Thursday, who never asked for anything for herself, Lorraine Ashford, an old fool. That's what their son called them. Not to their faces, never to their faces. Only when the door was closed and the engine was running and he thought no one could hear. I sat in my apartment. The footage was frozen on the last frame. Marcus in the driver's seat, phone to his ear, smiling. I closed the laptop. I opened it again. I closed it. I pressed my palms flat against the desk and breathed. In, out, in, out. The way they teach you in the crisis management seminars at work. Stay calm, stay analytical. Emotions compromise evidence. But I wasn't at work. This wasn't a case file. This was my family, my brother, my parents, and the evidence didn't compromise my emotions. It confirmed them. Everything I'd felt for 29 years, every suspicion, every quiet ache, every moment I told myself I was overreacting, it was all real. Marcus was exactly what I'd feared. And my parents were exactly as vulnerable as I'd worried. I picked up my phone and called Grandma Rosie. It was 11:47 at night. She answered on the second ring. She never slept before midnight. Grandma, I have enough. Silence. 3 seconds. 4.
What are you going to do, sweetheart?
I looked at the frozen frame on my laptop. Marcus, smiling, phone to his ear, my parents' house in the background, the house they were about to lose because their son needed another pipeline. My job. The next morning I woke up at 5:30. I showered. I put on my gray blazer, the one I wore to depositions. I drove to my office on 17th Street, the same street where Marcus rented his glass door facade, 3 blocks north. I parked. I walked past his building on purpose. The lights were off. The receptionist's desk was empty. Even the lie was asleep. I got to my office, closed the door, sat down, opened my laptop. Then I dialed a number I'd saved in my phone 4 weeks earlier, but never had the courage to call. FBI Financial Crimes Division, Denver Field Office. Good morning. I'd like to report a suspected Ponzi scheme and wire fraud. The primary suspect is my brother. The agent asked me to hold. 37 seconds of silence. Then a voice, calm, professional, female. This is Special Agent Morales. Tell me everything. So I did. Special Agent Morales listened for 47 minutes without interrupting. I walked her through everything. The tax filings, the photocopied contracts from Grandma Rosie, the shell companies, the audio from the porch call, the video of Gerald and Lorraine signing the fraudulent refinance, the phone call from the driveway. These old fools will sign anything. When I finished, the line was quiet for 6 seconds. Then Morales spoke. Miss Ashford, how long have you worked in forensic accounting? 7 years. And in your professional opinion, what are we looking at? A textbook Ponzi scheme in the accumulation phase. Fabricated returns documents, at least 4 shell entities used as pass-throughs. Guaranteed returns marketed to unsophisticated investors without SEC registration. Wire transfers across state lines, which makes it federal. An active recruitment of new victims to sustain payouts to earlier ones. Another pause. I could hear her pen scratching on paper. I'm going to transfer you to our Financial Crimes Task Force. Can you come in this week with everything you have, all of it, digital and hard copies? I can come today. Today works. I drove to the FBI Denver Field Office on Stout Street at 10:30 that morning, carrying a laptop bag, 2 encrypted thumb drives, a printed binder of transaction analyses, and the manila folder Grandma Rosie had given me 2 months earlier. I sat in a windowless conference room with Special Agent Morales and a second agent named Tran for 3 hours and 22 minutes. They asked questions. Precise, methodical questions. The kind I asked in my own investigations. Where did the money originate? Which accounts received wire transfers? Can you trace the flow from source to shell to personal expenditure? I could. I had. I'd mapped every dollar I could find across 4 entities in 2 states, Colorado and Wyoming. Agent Tran leaned back in his chair when I showed him the spreadsheet. You've done our job for us, Miss Ashford. I do this for a living. Clearly. He looked at Morales. She nodded. We're opening a formal investigation. Based on your evidence and our preliminary review, we believe this qualifies for wire fraud, securities fraud, and potentially mail fraud if the prospectuses were sent physically. We'll need to subpoena bank records, but your analysis gives us enough for that. Then she said the part I'd been dreading. You understand this is a federal investigation now. Everything is confidential. You cannot tell your parents. You cannot confront your brother. You cannot discuss this with anyone outside this room except your attorney, if you choose to retain one. Any contact with the subject could compromise the case. The subject, my brother, Marcus, the boy who taught me to ride a bike when I was 6, the teenager who drove me to school when Lorraine overslept, the man who called our parents old fools and smiled while he stole their future. I understand. This may take months, Miss Ashford. I know. I walked out of the FBI field office at 2:15 in the afternoon. The sun was too bright. Denver in early spring, the sky so blue it felt like a lie. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 12 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there with my hands on the steering wheel and breathed. Then I went back to work. I had a client meeting at 3:30. A manufacturing firm in Aurora suspected their CFO of embezzlement. Routine case, clean numbers. Easy compared to what I'd just handed the federal government. The next 3 months were the longest of my life. I went to work. I came home. I checked the cameras. I forwarded anything relevant to Agent Morales through an encrypted email channel she'd set up. I watched my parents' life continue in real time on a screen, and I couldn't say a word. Gerald called me once during that period, once in 3 months. He needed me to look at a letter from the IRS about a late filing penalty. I fixed it in 20 minutes, he said.
Thanks, Claire. You're good with this stuff.
Then he asked if I'd heard about Marcus's new project in Cheyenne, Wyoming, a strip mall development.
Your brother's expanding into a whole new state. Can you believe it?
I could believe it. The strip mall in Cheyenne didn't exist. I'd already verified that. It was another phantom investment to justify incoming funds from new victims. The Petersons in Fort Collins. A retired couple named Walsh in Laramie. A small business owner in Casper named Deborah Klein, who'd invested her late husband's life insurance, $92,000, into Ashford Investments because Marcus had sat in her living room and told her he'd take care of her. 17 families. I counted them as the FBI investigation expanded. 17 families in Colorado and Wyoming that Marcus had targeted, courted, and defrauded. Total estimated losses, $2,800,000. My parents' $340,000 was the largest single amount, but Deborah Klein's $92,000 was the one that kept me up at night. Because that was all she had. Every cent her husband had left her after 41 years of marriage and a heart attack at 63. Marcus took it. He took it, and he bought a Rolex and paid rent on a penthouse in Cherry Creek and leased a Mercedes and printed business cards with gold embossing. He turned a widow's grief into a wristwatch. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened at my own job. My firm, Callaway & Associates, had been tracking my work for months. They noticed. Not my family situation, they knew nothing about that. But they noticed my skills, the precision of my analyses, the speed at which I could untangle complex financial structures, the clarity of my reports. In May, 3 months after I walked into the FBI office, my managing partner called me into his corner office on the 14th floor. Claire, we're promoting you to manager. Effective June 1st, you'll lead the Forensic Investigations Division for the Rocky Mountain region. Manager, at 29, the youngest in the firm's history to hold that title. A title that came with a salary of $142,000, an office with a window and a team of 6 analysts reporting to me. I shook his hand. I thanked him. I walked back to my desk and sat down. Then my phone buzzed. Agent Morales. Miss Ashford, we've completed the subpoenas. Bank records confirm your analysis across all 4 shell entities. We've identified 17 victims across 2 states. The U.S. Attorney's Office has reviewed the evidence and approved an arrest warrant. My heart stopped. When? We'd like to move within the week. There's one complication. What complication? Your brother is hosting an investor appreciation dinner this Saturday evening at the Ritz-Carlton in Denver. 40 guests, including several of the victims. We believe he's planning to solicit additional investments at the event. We arrest him there. We catch him in the act of active solicitation, which strengthens the wire fraud charges significantly. I closed my eyes. You're going to arrest him at the dinner. With your permission, we'd like you to be present, not as an agent, as a witness. You know the victims, you know the financial structure, and frankly, your presence helps establish the timeline for the jury. I sat at my desk for a long time after that call. The office hummed around me, keyboards clicking, the coffee maker gurgling. Normal sounds on a normal Wednesday. On Saturday, my brother would be arrested in front of 40 people at the Ritz-Carlton, Denver, and I would be standing in the room when it happened. On a Tuesday morning in March, my phone had buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Now, 3 months later, that phone call was about to end my brother's empire. My hands were steady, my heart was not. Saturday evening, the Ritz-Carlton, Denver, 1750 Curtis Street. I arrived at 6:20, 10 minutes early. I wore a black dress I'd bought 3 years ago for a firm gala and never worn again. Simple, professional. Not the kind of dress you wear to watch your brother get arrested. But then again, there's no dress code for that. The event was on the 3rd floor. The grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers, white linen tablecloths, centerpieces of white roses and eucalyptus. A string quartet playing Vivaldi in the corner. Marcus had spared no expense. Of course he hadn't. It wasn't his money. There was a banner over the entrance. Ashford Investments building futures together. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I signed in at the registration table. A young woman in a black blazer handed me a name tag and a glossy folder. Inside the folder was a 4-page prospectus with projected returns for the next fiscal year. 18%, guaranteed. I'd seen the same document in the FBI evidence file, the fake one. 40 guests filled the room, couples mostly, older, retired or near retirement. The kind of people who'd worked their whole lives and trusted a young man in a nice suit who promised to make their money grow. I recognized some names from the FBI case file. The Hendersons from Boulder, the Walshes from Laramie, a woman sitting alone at table 7, small, silver-haired, wearing a cardigan that looked like it had been ironed twice. Deborah Klein. I looked at her for a long time. She was holding the prospectus like it was a hymnal, reading every word, believing every line. $92,000. Her dead husband's last gift to her, already gone. Gerald and Lorraine were at the head table. Gerald was wearing a sport coat I'd never seen. New. Lorraine had her hair done. They looked proud. They looked like parents at their son's wedding. They had no idea they were sitting in the middle of a crime scene. Marcus entered at 6:45. Late, deliberately late, the way important people arrive. He wore a charcoal suit, slim, fit, no tie. The Rolex caught the chandelier light. He shook hands as he walked through the room. Every handshake was firm. Every smile was warm. Every word was poison.
Mr. Henderson, great to see you. Your Q4 returns are looking phenomenal. Deborah, you look wonderful tonight. Jim would be so proud of what you're building.
He used her dead husband's name. He used it like a tool. I watched Deborah's eyes fill with gratitude and something close to love, and I had to look away. Marcus took the podium at 7:15. He tapped the microphone twice. The room quieted.
Thank you all for being here tonight. Every person in this room is part of the Ashford family.
He paused for effect, smiled.
When I started this company 7 years ago, my father gave me my first investment, $25,000 in a handshake. He said, "Go build something, son." Tonight, I'm proud to say we've built something extraordinary. Together.
He gestured to a screen behind him. A slideshow began. Charts, graphs, photos of properties, some real, most fabricated. I recognized 2 images from stock photo websites I'd flagged in my analysis for the FBI.
This year, Ashford Investments delivered an average return of 17.6% across all portfolios. Next year, we're projecting 19.
Applause. Gerald clapped the loudest. Lorraine smiled. The Hendersons nodded at each other. Deborah Klein clutched her prospectus tighter. 19%. He was promising 19%. The S&P 500 averaged 10. Hedge funds averaged 11 on a good year. 19% guaranteed was not ambitious. It was mathematically impossible without fraud. Marcus continued for 12 more minutes. He talked about expansion into Wyoming, about new commercial properties, about generational wealth and financial legacy. He used the word trust 14 times. I counted. At 7:32, he raised his glass.
To trust, to family, to the future we're building together.
40 glasses rose, crystal catching light, smiles all around. Then the doors opened. Not dramatically, not like in the movies. The double doors at the back of the ballroom simply opened and 6 people walked in. 4 men, 2 women, dark suits, credentials hanging from lanyards. The kind of quiet authority that doesn't need to announce itself. Special Agent Morales was in front. I recognized Agent Tran behind her. 2 more agents flanked the sides of the room, 2 positioned near the exits. The string quartet stopped playing. The violinist saw the badges first. She lowered her bow mid-measure. The cellist followed. The silence that replaced Vivaldi was absolute. Morales walked directly to the podium. Her heels clicked on the hardwood floor. Every head in the room turned. Marcus still had his champagne glass raised. His smile was frozen. Not gone. Frozen. Like a photograph of a man who hadn't yet realized the ground beneath him had vanished. Marcus Ashford. She held up her credentials. FBI Financial Crimes Division. You're under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, and investment advisor fraud in violation of Title 18 United States Code. The champagne glass stayed in the air for 3 more seconds. Then Marcus lowered it. Slowly. He set it on the podium with the careful precision of a man who still believed he could control the room.
There's been a mistake.
His voice was steady, the con man's voice, practiced, smooth.
I don't know what this is about, but I'm sure we can...
Turn around, please, hands behind your back. He didn't turn around. He looked at Gerald. My father was sitting at the head table, napkin still in his lap, mouth open. Lorraine had both hands pressed flat against the table, as if the room was tilting.
Dad!
Just the one word, not a plea, not an explanation. Just Dad, the way a child says it when the world stops making sense. Gerald didn't move. He stared at his son like he was seeing a stranger. Agent Tran stepped forward and turned Marcus by the shoulder. The handcuffs clicked. That sound, metallic, final. It echoed off the chandeliers and the linen and the white roses, and every person in that room heard it. 40 guests, 17 of them victims. All watching the man they'd trusted with their savings being led away in handcuffs past the centerpieces he'd paid for with their money. Deborah Klein dropped her prospectus, the pages scattered across the floor under table 7. She didn't pick them up. She just sat there, still, small, her hands folded in her lap like she was praying. The Hendersons stood up. Mrs. Henderson grabbed her husband's arm. "The money," she whispered. "Our money." It wasn't a question. It was a realization. Gerald finally moved. He pushed back from the table. The chair legs screeched against the floor. He stood up and took one step toward Marcus, then stopped. His mouth opened. No words came out. For the first time in my life, Gerald Ashford had nothing to say. Lorraine was crying, silently, the way she'd always cried. No sound, no drama, just tears sliding down her cheeks while her hands stayed perfectly still on the white tablecloth. Marcus was escorted through the ballroom, past the registration table, past the banner that said, "Building Futures Together," past the string quartet that would never finish their Vivaldi piece. He didn't look back. But as the agents guided him through the door, he turned his head. Not toward Gerald, not toward Lorraine. Toward me.
You.
Quiet, almost a whisper.
It was you.
I didn't answer. I didn't nod. I didn't look away. The doors closed behind him. Then my father asked the FBI agent a question that shattered something inside me.
Who reported him?
Agent Morales looked at me. My father followed her gaze. And for the first time in 29 years, Gerald Ashford truly saw his daughter. The ballroom emptied slowly. Guests left in clusters whispering, clutching their coats and their prospectuses like evidence they weren't ready to throw away. Some were crying. Some were on their phones already calling banks, calling lawyers, calling anyone who could tell them their money was still there. It wasn't. Agent Morales stayed behind. She spoke briefly with Gerald and Lorraine in a private room adjacent to the ballroom. I wasn't present for that conversation, but I was told later what she said. She explained the charges. She explained the scope. She explained that their son had defrauded 17 families across 2 states. She explained that the home equity line of credit Gerald and Lorraine had signed was obtained through fraudulent inducement, and that the FBI's legal team would work with the U.S. attorney to have it voided. Their house would be protected. She also told them who had filed the initial report. At 8:47, Gerald and Lorraine walked out of the private room. Lorraine's mascara had bled into 2 dark lines beneath her eyes. Gerald's sport coat was unbuttoned. His tie was loosened. He looked like a man who'd aged 10 years in 90 minutes. They saw me in the hallway. I was sitting on an upholstered bench near the elevator. I hadn't moved since Marcus was taken away. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what came next. For 3 months, every waking hour had been directed toward this moment. And now the moment was here and I felt nothing. Not relief, not victory, not sadness. Just a hollow, ringing silence, like the air after a bell stops. Gerald stopped 6 feet away from me. Lorraine stood behind him, one hand on his arm. He looked at me. Really looked at me. Not through me, not past me, at me.
You did this.
His voice was hoarse, raw.
You reported your own brother to the FBI being...
I stood up. My legs were steady. My voice was not. I saved your house, Dad. That's what I did.
He's your brother, Claire.
Gerald's voice cracked on my name.
He's your blood, your family. You don't call the FBI on family.
Family doesn't call you an old fool behind your back, Dad. Gerald flinched, a physical flinch like the words had weight and hit him in the chest.
That's not... He wouldn't say that. Marcus wouldn't.
I have it on video. I have him on camera, sitting in your driveway in the car you co-signed, calling you and Mom old fools who'll sign anything. I have 17 hours of footage. I have 3 months of wire transfers. I have 4 shell companies that exist on paper only. I have the fake prospectus he was handing out tonight, the same one Deborah Klein was holding. Deborah Klein Dad, a 71-year-old widow who gave Marcus her dead husband's life insurance. $92,000, gone. Gerald shook his head, back and forth, slowly like a metronome running down.
There has to be an explanation. Marcus made mistakes, sure. Every businessman...
He's not a businessman, Dad. I kept my voice level, controlled, the same voice I used in depositions. He's a con artist. He's been running a Ponzi scheme for at least 5 years. He took $340,000 from you and Mom. He leveraged your house for another $385,000. He fabricated every return statement he ever showed you. The 18%, it never existed. Not $1 of profit was real.
Stop.
Gerald held up his hand.
Just stop. You're wrong. You have to be wrong.
I'm a forensic accountant, Dad. This is what I do. I trace fraud. I build cases. I find where the money went and who took it. I paused. I'm not wrong. Gerald stared at me. His jaw worked. His eyes were wet, but he wouldn't let the tears fall. 34 years of getting up at 5 in the morning. 34 years of shaking hands and remembering names and building something honest from nothing. And his son had turned all of it into a prop for a scam.
You should have told me.
He said.
You should have come to me first.
I tried, Dad. For years I tried. Every time I mentioned that Marcus's numbers didn't add up, you told me I was jealous. Every time I asked a question, you told me I didn't understand business. You said I was just a number cruncher. You said my job was counting other people's money. You never once considered that maybe, just maybe, the daughter you ignored was the only one telling you the truth. Silence. The hallway was empty, except for us. The elevator hummed behind the wall. Somewhere downstairs, a door closed. Then Lorraine spoke. I didn't expect it. Lorraine never spoke when Gerald was in the room. Lorraine wiped counters. Lorraine passed dishes. Lorraine pressed her lips together and folded her opinions like napkins.
She's right, Gerald.
Gerald turned to her. His face was slack with disbelief. Not at the words, at who was saying them.
What?
She's right.
Lorraine's voice trembled, but it didn't break.
I knew something was wrong. I've known for 2 years. The statements didn't make sense. The money kept disappearing. I asked Marcus just once about a withdrawal I didn't recognize. He told me not to worry about it. He told me to trust him. And I did. Because you told me to. Because you always told me Marcus knew best.
She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Mascara smeared across her wrist.
And Claire, our Claire, she called us from a hospital bed with broken bones and we didn't come. She graduated top of her class and we didn't show up on time. She got promoted to a position most people don't reach until they're 40, and I handed her a casserole dish and changed the subject.
Lorraine looked at me. Her eyes were red and raw, but something in them was clear. Clearer than I'd ever seen.
I'm sorry, Claire. I'm sorry I never stood up for you. I'm sorry I let your father's pride decide who mattered in this family, and I'm sorry I wiped down that counter every time I should have opened my mouth.
The counter. She remembered the counter. Every counter she'd ever wiped instead of speaking. She remembered all of them. Gerald stood between us. His wife on one side, his daughter on the other. The 2 women he'd overlooked for 30 years. The 2 women who were still standing. I reached into my bag and pulled out a printed binder. 56 pages. Every transaction, every shell company, every fabricated statement. Every dollar my parents had lost, traced from their savings account through 4 entities, and out the other side, into Marcus's rent, Marcus's car, Marcus's Rolex, Marcus's champagne. I set it on the bench between us. This is what your son built, Dad. Not a business, not an empire, a trap. And you were in it, both of you. Gerald looked at the binder. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. He knew. Somewhere beneath the denial and the pride and the 34 years of believing his son was his legacy, he knew. The FBI confirmed the refinance documents were fraudulent. Your house will be protected. The equity line will be voided. You won't lose the house. But the savings, the $340,000 that's gone, Marcus spent it. All of it. Gerald's hands were shaking. He pressed them together, knuckle against knuckle, trying to hold something steady. But there was nothing left to hold. I don't need an apology, Dad. I didn't do this for an apology. I did this because you're my parents, because someone had to protect you, and because the career you spent 29 years dismissing was the only thing standing between you and losing everything. My father didn't speak for a long time. The hallway was silent. The elevator hummed. A clock somewhere ticked. Then Gerald Ashford, the man who never apologized, who never admitted fault, who never showed weakness, who built his entire identity on the belief that his son was his greatest achievement, put his face in his hands and cried. Not quietly, not with dignity. He cried the way a man cries when the floor disappears and there's nothing left to grab. Deep, shaking sobs that echoed off the marble walls of the Ritz-Carlton, Denver. Lorraine put her arm around him. She looked at me over his shoulder. She mouthed 2 words. Thank you. I nodded. I picked up my bag. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the button. The doors opened. I stepped inside. And for the first time in 29 years, I wasn't asking for permission. I wasn't apologizing. I was done. The trial lasted 11 days. Marcus was charged with 14 counts of wire fraud, 6 counts of securities fraud, and 3 counts of mail fraud. The evidence was overwhelming: bank records, wire transfers, the fabricated prospectuses, recorded phone calls, and the footage. The footage of my father signing away his home while his son smiled and lied to his face. Marcus's defense attorney tried to argue that the investments were legitimate but poorly managed, that Marcus was a bad businessman, not a criminal, that the losses were the result of market fluctuations, not intentional fraud. The jury didn't buy it. 12 people watched Marcus on that hidden camera sitting in my parents' driveway, calling them old fools. 12 people listened to him tell his associate to send Deborah Klein, the fake one. 12 people saw the spreadsheets I'd built dollar by dollar, tracing every cent from the victims' accounts through 4 shell companies and into Marcus's personal checking account. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon, guilty on all 23 counts. Sentencing was 6 weeks later. Marcus stood before federal judge Patricia Emerson in the United States District Courthouse in Denver. The same courthouse where Grandma Rosie had worked for 35 years. The same building where she'd processed filings and watched justice move slowly but thoroughly. 8 years, federal prison. No parole eligibility for 6 years and 8 months. Full restitution, ordered $2,800,000 to be repaid to all 17 victim families through asset seizure and garnished future earnings. Marcus turned around after sentencing. He looked at the gallery. Gerald was there, Lorraine was there, I was there. Grandma Rosie was there, sitting in the second row, hands folded, expression unreadable. Marcus looked at Gerald first. Gerald couldn't meet his eyes. Then Marcus looked at me. His jaw tightened. He didn't speak. An agent took his arm and led him through the side door. The door closed. The courtroom was silent. I sat there for a long time after everyone else left. The wooden bench was hard. The ceiling was high. The American flag hung motionless near the judge's chair. I thought about the last 7 years, the shell companies, the fake returns, the champagne at the Ritz-Carlton, the widow in the cardigan, my father's signature on a document he never read. Then I thought about something else, something smaller. Marcus teaching me to ride a bike in the driveway on Meadowbrook Lane. I was 6. He was 10. He held the back of the seat and ran alongside me until I found my balance. When I finally pedaled on my own, he cheered. A real cheer. The cheer of a 10-year-old boy who was proud of his little sister. That boy was gone. I don't know when he disappeared. Maybe it was gradual. Maybe the pressure of being Gerald's golden son, the weight of always needing to perform, to impress, to justify the $25,000 and the co-signed Mercedes and the Sunday speeches, maybe all of that hollowed him out piece by piece until there was nothing left but the performance. Maybe Marcus became a con man because our father made him believe he had to be extraordinary. And when he wasn't, when the first house flip failed and the second one failed and the numbers never added up, he couldn't admit it. He couldn't walk into Gerald's kitchen and say, "Dad, I failed. I'm not who you think I am." Because in our house, failure wasn't an option for Marcus. Failure was for Claire. I'm not excusing him. What he did was criminal. What he did to Deborah Klein, to the Petersons, to the Walshes, to all 17 families, that was evil dressed in a charcoal suit. But I understand the machine that built him. I grew up in the same machine. It just spit me out differently. After the trial, things changed, slowly, painfully. The way bones heal, not all at once, not without aching. The house on Meadowbrook Lane was saved. The FBI's legal team worked with the U.S. attorney to void the fraudulent equity line. Gerald and Lorraine kept the house, but the savings were gone. $340,000, Gerald's retirement, Lorraine's security. 34 years of 5 o'clock mornings and brake rotors and handshakes evaporated into shell companies with P.O. boxes in Aurora. Gerald went back to the shop. He'd been planning to retire that year. Instead, he unlocked the door at 6 a.m. the Monday after the verdict and started restocking shelves. He was 63 years old. He would work until he couldn't anymore. There was no other option. Lorraine started seeing a therapist. She'd never seen one before. She told me about it on a phone call 3 weeks after the trial, her voice tentative like she was confessing something shameful. The therapist says I've been suppressing my own needs for 40 years. Can you imagine? I could imagine. I'd watched her do it my entire life. Gerald began calling me on Sundays. The first call was awkward. 12 minutes of silence punctuated by comments about the weather. The second was slightly better. He asked about my job. Not the way he used to dismissively like it was a hobby. He asked like he wanted to understand.
Oh, what exactly do you do, Claire? I mean, really, walk me through it.
So I did. I explained forensic accounting. I explained how I trace money through systems designed to hide it. I explained the mathematics of fraud and the patience required to find it. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't change the subject to Marcus. On the fourth Sunday call, Gerald said something he'd never said before.
I'm proud of you, Claire.
4 words, ordinary words. The kind of words most fathers say 100 times before their daughter turns 10. Gerald said them at 63 on a Sunday evening over a phone line after his son went to federal prison and his daughter saved his house. I held the phone to my ear and closed my eyes. I didn't say anything for a moment. I just let the words exist. Let them land. Let them settle into the place they'd been missing from for 29 years. Thank you, Dad. That was enough. For now, that was enough. Grandma Rosie invited me to Capitol Hill the following weekend. Lemon bars, real ones this time. No manila folders, no hidden cameras, just Earl Grey and butter and the Sunday crossword spread out on the kitchen table. She slid something across the table, a small velvet box. Inside was a gold ring, simple, worn smooth by decades of wear. My grandfather's ring. He'd worn it every day for 45 years as a court officer.
He would have been proud of you, Rosie said. He believed in evidence, in truth, in doing the right thing even when it costs you. She paused. Especially when it costs you.
I put the ring on my right hand. It fit perfectly. 6 months have passed since that night at the Ritz-Carlton. I still live in Denver. I still work at Callaway and Associates. I still drive past Marcus's old office on 17th Street. The glass doors are dark now. The receptionist is gone. The sign has been taken down. Just an empty storefront with a for lease sign in the window. I visit my parents every other Sunday. Not every week. Not because I don't care. Because boundaries aren't punishments. They're how you teach people to love you correctly. Gerald is learning. He's slow. He's stubborn. He still sometimes starts a sentence with, Marcus used to, and then stops himself. But he's learning. Last month he hung my forensic accounting certification on the wall of his shop, right next to the framed photo of the store's grand opening in 1991. He didn't ask permission. He just put it there, between the flag and the first dollar he ever earned. Lorraine sends me letters, handwritten, one every 2 weeks. She doesn't apologize in them. She tells me things, small things, a recipe she tried, a bird she saw in the garden, a memory of me as a child that she'd never shared before. In one letter she wrote, I remember you won a math competition in 6th grade. I never told you, but I cried in the car afterward. Not because I wasn't proud, because I was and I didn't know how to say it. I'm learning how to say it now. I keep every letter in a wooden box on my nightstand. Some nights I open the box and read them. Not all of them, just one, whichever one I need that night. And I think about what Grandma Rosie said.
Your worth isn't determined by who sees it.
She was right. My worth was never in their hands. It was in mine. In the spreadsheets I built, and the cases I solved, and the truth I told, when it would have been easier to stay silent. My parents didn't make me valuable. They just took a very long time to notice. And that's okay, because I noticed first. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors you control. And your worth isn't determined by who sees it. It's determined by what you do with it, even when no one is watching. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to set a boundary with family? How did it change your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, check out the video in the description. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it.